It began with laughter. German generals in North Africa stared through their binoculars at a line of tiny box-shaped vehicles bouncing across the dunes. They looked like toys, small, clumsy, ridiculous, beside the armored columns of the Afrika Korps. One officer reportedly smirked and said, "That's America's idea of a military vehicle?" But those little machines would soon hum across every battlefield on Earth. The Willys Jeep, mocked at first, would become one of the most important weapons of the Second World War. In 1940, before the United States even entered the war, the U.S. Army sent out an impossible request. They wanted a lightweight reconnaissance vehicle, four-wheel drive, under 1,300 pounds, strong enough to carry men and guns, and delivered in just 49 days. Most companies refused. Only 3 tried: Bantam, Willys Overland, and Ford. Bantam, a tiny Pennsylvania firm, shocked everyone by building the first prototype on time, the Bantam reconnaissance car. But the Army didn't believe such a small company could mass produce it. They handed Bantam's blueprints to Willys and Ford. Willys gave it power, a 60-horsepower Go Devil engine that could climb mountains. Ford gave it speed and interchangeable parts. Together, they created the vehicle that soldiers would simply call the Jeep. When American troops first rolled them off ships in North Africa, the British scoffed. The Germans laughed. The Jeep looked like something built in a barn. Flat fenders, thin tires, canvas roof. But then they watched it move. The Jeep didn't care about terrain. It climbed dunes where tanks sank. It splashed through wadis, tore through mud, bounced over rocks, and just kept going. Where roads ended, the Jeep began. Its Go Devil engine could pull anti-tank guns, carry the wounded, or race ahead for reconnaissance. In a war defined by machines, it was small, but it was everywhere. By 1942, it was already rewriting the rules of warfare. In North Africa, Patton's men called it the war horse. In Italy, it ferried medics and generals. In the Pacific, it became a lifeline through jungle and sand. General Eisenhower once said, "America could not have won the war without it." He wasn't exaggerating. The Jeep became the Army's legs. It was the scout, the ambulance, the tow truck, the taxi, the messenger, and the mule, all in one. Its design was pure genius in its simplicity. Flat fenders for soldiers to sit on. A windshield that folded flat to reduce glare and wind resistance. A canvas top that could come off in seconds. A gearbox that could handle anything from slow mud crawls to 60 miles an hour on open ground. It could carry 600 pounds of cargo, yet 4 men could lift it out of a ditch by hand. And when it broke, a hammer and a wrench were all you needed to fix it. By late June 1944, more than 150,000 vehicles had come ashore in Normandy. Thousands of them, the little Willys and Ford quarter-tons that seemed to multiply with every tide. They drove straight off Higgins boats and LCTS with deep wading kits, tall intake and exhaust stacks keeping water out, as they nosed through surf, climbed the shingle, and hit the sand running. On the beaches and causeways, they did everything at once. Ammo runs to the line. Dispatch riders with radios lashed to the rear deck. Wire cutter bars on the bumpers to snap tripwires strung across lanes. They moved wounded men fast. Medics bolted litter frames to the sides and across the rear, turning a quarter-ton truck into a 3-liter ambulance. A post-action medical report from the Normandy landings called these Jeep ambulances practicable and even advantageous for casualty evacuation across bad ground. Exactly what the beaches and bocage demanded. From there, Navy beach parties and LST crews took over, lifting tens of thousands of casualties off the beaches to ships offshore. Another link in the chain that started with a Jeep bouncing over sand. Inland, The little trucks threaded the bocage where big vehicles bogged or couldn't pass. They hauled ammunition and rations, dragged light guns, ferried officers who needed eyes on the fight, and kept signal units moving so fire missions and resupply orders didn't stop. The Jeep's utility, scout, taxi, tow, radio, meant there was always one close by, idling at the edge of a hedgerow. German officers began to take notice. Their situation reports increasingly contrasted Allied motorized mobility with German formations that still leaned on bicycles, horse teams, and thin motor transport. Mobile. More for staying in the field than moving fast. The Allies had something Germany didn't. In the West, by 1944, the ability to push men and material anywhere, quickly. The Jeep was no longer a joke. It was a tactical nightmare. A small, relentless machine that made the Allied army feel like it had legs in every direction at once. Between 1941 and 1945, America turned the Jeep into an industrial rhythm. Willys Overland in Toledo and Ford, across 6 plants, built well over 640,000 standardized quarter tons. Roughly 362,872 from Willys, and about 282,354 from Ford. Enough that at Toledo a finished Jeep could roll off the line about every 2 minutes during peak shifts. Factories ran hot day and night, with men and women on the lines, gauges in hand and rivet guns singing. Standardization was the secret sauce. The U.S. Army forced a single, common design, so Ford's GPW, the W literally for Willys, had to match Willys' MB part for part. Inspectors would tear 2 Jeeps down, shuffle the parts, and build them back up to prove it. Ford even stamped tiny script F marks on its bolts and brackets, pride marks on pieces that still fit a Willys without complaint. Bodies became common too. American Central Manufacturing supplied the majority of tubs, and in early 1944, the so-called composite body erased the last fussy differences. Windshields, hoods, seats, swap them across brands and keep moving. That's how you feed a global war. The supply chain was a battlefield of its own. Spicer axles and transfer cases, Midland steel frames, Kelsey Hayes wheels, parts converging from all over the Midwest into Ohio, Michigan, Texas, California, Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and New Jersey assembly plants. The point wasn't just speed, it was interchangeability at scale, so a frontline mechanic with a crate and a wrench could make any Jeep whole again. And those crates mattered. To save ship space and protect against salt spray, many Jeeps went overseas knocked down in crates, then were reassembled near the fight. Ford's Richmond, California plant reportedly crated about 70% of its output because the port was right there. The Jeep in a crate legends came later. The wartime truth was simpler. Flat pack the war's legs, move them fast, bolt them together, go. A bolt from a Ford fit a Willys. A tub stamped in Indiana fit them both. The little car that began as a desperate experiment became the engine of an army. By 1944, even German generals had stopped laughing. They knew what the Jeep meant now: speed, surprise, and adaptability. Rommel himself noted that the enemy's light cars appear everywhere, even where no road exists. The Jeep had become the very embodiment of blitzkrieg, the German doctrine of rapid mobile warfare, now perfected and turned against them. Captured troops were often seen driving Allied Jeeps after surrender. The irony was complete. The vehicle they mocked had become their transport to captivity. Soldiers loved the Jeep like no other machine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was loyal and reliable. One Marine said, "You can drown it, flip it, shoot it, just let it dry, and it'll drive again." When the war ended, the Jeep didn't. In Europe, Thousands of surplus one-quarter tons were sold or handed over to rebuild shattered towns. France alone received roughly 20,000 by May 1946. Farmers and municipalities put them straight to work, plowing lanes, towing sprayers, hauling firewood and mail where bridges were gone and roads were ruts. Across the Pacific, the Jeep became a daily sight of the occupation. Photographers caught the first U.S. Jeeps rolling from Atsugi Air Base to Yokohama within days of surrender. Little open trucks threading through a ruined capital, ferrying officers, messages, and light cargo as Japan began to stand up again. Willys moved just as fast to civil life. In July 1945, it launched the CJ2A Universal Jeep, the first mass-produced civilian 4x4, built for work as much as for roads. It wore a new 7-slot grille, kept the faithful L134 Go Devil, added a stronger T90 gearbox, a tailgate, and a side-mounted spare. Dealers demoed it in fields and factories with PTO kits that spun saws, pumps, threshers, and belt drives right off the Jeep's rear crossmember. The sales pitch was blunt. This one machine could do the job of horses in a tractor all day without overheating. Production proved the point. 214,760 CJ2As rolled out from 1945 to 1949, many wearing fresh farm paint and civilian lighting, but still sharing DNA and even leftover parts with wartime MBs. Veterans knew exactly what they were looking at. On American roads and dirt tracks, the silhouette meant endurance, the start and go of victory, freedom on 4 wheels, only now with a tailgate and a tool rack. And the Jeep's second life spread further still. In the Philippines, surplus units morphed into jeepneys, lengthened, roofed, and painted into rolling public transit. Proof that a vehicle built for war could be repurposed to carry a city. Years later, when asked which Allied weapon impressed him most, a former German officer didn't hesitate. He said, "The American Jeep." It won because it never stopped. And he was right. The Jeep didn't roar like a tank or soar like a fighter. It rattled, it coughed, it bounced, and it kept going. It carried millions through mud, snow, jungle, and war. It carried hope. And it never quit. German generals once laughed at the Jeep. But laughter fades. Legacy doesn't. The little machine they mocked conquered every battlefield. And then it conquered the world.